All right, guys, so I'm going to give you one last video explaining the grievances, the complaints that the colonists had in the Declaration of Independence before we broke up with the King of England. For starters, we have the complaint that the king and the government, the parliament that in England was simply not protecting our rights. The colonists believe, having read the Magna Carta, having believed in the English Bill of Rights, that there were certain rights that the governments needed to protect, and as John Locke said, that those rights were their right to life, liberty, and property. The colonists essentially said, hey, the government is not protecting our rights. So that's the first complaint. The second complaint was that the colonists were not able to move and expand. The colonies, the 13 colonies, were along the eastern side of the United States, but there was all this other space over here, and they wanted to move. The problem is that in 1763, the king issued something called the Proclamation of 1763, and in it the king prohibited the colonists from moving out west, moving out into the area known as the Northwest Territory. And so they were bothered by that. That limited their ability to make money, so they didn't like that. Other grievances include that they were being taxed without representation. We know that the Stamp Act and the Townshend Revenue Act increased taxes on goods that the colonists were using. We also know that in response to these acts, this legislation passed by the king and parliament, that the colonists organized boycotts and protests to signal their displeasure with these tax policies. We know that they also were complaining that they were not able to govern themselves. We know that the Declaratory Act essentially told the colonists that the king makes the laws and you have to follow the laws. Colonists had gotten used to kind of taking control of their own lives, and remember in class we said, imagine you got real used to being independent, you living in your own house, and then all of a sudden, knock, 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 here's your parents and they want to move in and they want to live in your house as an adult, and then they want you to start acting like a kid again and listening to their rules. You wouldn't like that. So the Declaratory Act treated them like kids, and they weren't able to make government decisions for themselves. They were also complaining that the intolerable acts, that they were being forced to no longer trade with France and Spain, other countries, their right to due process, their right to a trial by jury, their right to own weapons and express themselves, that all these rights that we now have in our Bill of Rights, that they were being violated. They didn't like that. And then, of course, we know the Quartering Act. The Quartering Act forced the colonists to have troops live in their home. And so all of these different complaints combined together, along with our statement of our belief that the purpose of government is to protect the life, the liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and property of its citizens, all of these complaints combined to form a picture that the government of the king and of the parliament was insufficient. In other words, it was time to break up and be independent.